Hello, I'm Tara Brabazon and welcome to the Post 16. Hold the space. Let me tell you how we got here. We've just finished 2 posts on leadership and followership. And after the session last week on followership, 2 likely people, Jamie Quinton and Jackie Hewitt, questioned whether there wasn't something in between leadership and followership. And they described this particular positioning as spacership. Really? Really? But as always with Jackie's powerful suggestions, I was provoked to think about what would that conceptualization actually look like. It was a brilliant, insightful moment. So I want to think about the people who exist in the space between leadership and followership. What is their role? What is their function? What is their truth? And I found this such a provocative conceptualization because I had to seek out some very, very unusual literature and try to bring relatively disparate knowledge systems together. And wow, I did that this week. And what I've done is I've deployed Homi Bhabha's third space. I'm going to talk about that in a second. Very complex, intricate, textured theorization. And I've used the literature from the death doula paradigm, particularly the concept holding the space. Now, I've used through all the vlogs that I've done for you over years now, I've used some relatively unusual literature to configure arguments for your consideration. This week is probably the most unusual, complex and disparate of knowledge systems I've ever deployed. But I also wanted to acknowledge the context for the conversation that we're having today. I am Generation X. We are a small generation that sits sort of in between the baby boomers. We sit in between the baby boomers and the millennials. We are really the forgotten generation. We're also a bit of a goth generation, obviously. We entered adulthood hoping that it was going to be okay. And it really hasn't been okay. We've worked incredibly hard, but we've known all the way along the pointlessness of that incredibly hard work. We hoped that we could make change to society, to health, to education, to the environment, to the very nature of citizenship. And we failed. And we have to live and work and take a breath every day, sitting in that failure. So it's absolutely clear that my generation, Generation X, have failed, but to quote Jackie Hewitt, we have survived. And like the film probably of our generation, Clerks, we've worked incredibly hard, but we know we've actually made no change through that work. And in fact, probably the world, education, our universities, our healthcare sector, they're probably in a much worse place than they were when we were young. So here we all sit between the baby boomers and the millennials. We are Generation X. We believed in making change and we failed. So that's the framing binary opposition that's going to start off my conversation today, because of course baby boomers are one side of a binary opposition, millennials are the other, Generation X is in the middle, we are in third space. So what is this third space? Well, that is my first theorization for the day. Third space is associated with a remarkable, profoundly influential scholar, Homi Bhabha. He's probably the most influential post-colonial scholar to have ever existed and lived and breathed. He's currently professor at Harvard University, and he's developed our very rubrics for post-colonialism: mimicry, difference, hybridity, ambivalence. And his concept of hybridity emerged transposed from the legendary Edward Said's work, exploring how colonialism is not in the past. It is in the present, and it is in dialogue, creating this complicated relationship between the past, the present, and the future. Wow. So Homi Bhabha's theorization of ambivalence captures the duality of identity within the colonized other. So all these concepts I've talked about today provide the frame, if you will, for third space. Third space describes an ambivalent space or sphere where two or more cultures or individuals emerge. This is the important bit. It's taken me, I'm 53, it's taken me my entire life to understand this. Third space is only summoned through textual systems, through enunciation. What that means is we don't know that third space exists until the consciousness and the literacy from textual systems show us that that space exists. If you will, textual systems, films, movies, songs, speaking, poetry, this sort of textual system prizes open the space to create the consciousness for those that follow. Wow. So in this third space, there is no pure culture. Authenticity is critiqued. The notion of the originality is critiqued, as is the notion that there's some culture or there's some value that is better or greater than something else. So this means a hierarchy of culture, if you will, is critiqued. Now, in this third space, wow, culture is really volatile. It can be appropriated, reappropriated, transposed, revisioned. It's volatile. It's agitated. And this means all of us, every single day, are creating relationships that might be quite volatile. Of course, this is the time in which we're living, yeah? So Bhabha valued what he described as these in-between spaces. These in-between spaces create a new mode of selfhood, new ways of thinking about identity, community, belonging, and also new ways of thinking about contestation and resistance. In this third space, these strong binary oppositions like man, woman, straight, gay, black, white, old, young, the sort of punctuation for life, if you will. In this third space, these strong binary oppositions are critiqued. And of course, one of those strong binary oppositions is leader and follower. Okay, so in this third space, meaning is contestable, meaning can be remade. This is where counter authorities are created, and the very structures that we take for granted are agitated. We have to think about the words we've been using our entire lives and what they really mean in this new space. All right, so between leadership and followership is a third space, Brill. Okay, we know that this is volatile, that this is agitated, that this is a difficult space, and this is a space where authority and power are critiqued. So, what's happening in this third space? The point is, we don't know. We never know. Textual systems have to be summoned so that we can work out, or at least have a breadcrumb trail of what is going on. And that's why from this point, I'm going to unfold our next literature, if you will, our next research concept. And I'm using the death doula lexicon. Yes, as some of you may know, who knew I'd be ever saying these words? This year I completed one of my more unusual qualifications. I gained certification as a death doula. Now, I did this qualification for many reasons. One is, and I think it was the key inspiration, if you will, is after Steve's death, Steve Redhead, my late husband, Steve Redhead's death, I'm asked a lot, to be frank, on a daily basis to help colleagues, citizens, friends, students sit in and understand death and sit in and understand grief. And for people who are locked in that grief, sitting with them, walking with them, and seeing if we can take that next breath and take that next step. So I understand the experiential horror of death and grief, but as I've said for 6 years in these vlogs and videos, right? Experience is not expertise. Experience can lead to expertise, but often it does not. So this wonderful qualification gave me the tropes, gave me the concepts, gave me the research, gave me the knowledge to be able to be a part of and support people going through this truly devastating moment in their lives. It's made me a better academic because I can enable colleagues and enable students. And I would argue the support that the death doula gives enhances all of us. It makes us better citizens. And of course, I was always very impressed by the origins of the word doula. It comes from the Greek, meaning female servant, or more interestingly, female slave. But how this word operates now, what's known as the modern doula, was best described by Amy Wright Glenn, who termed this, quote, skilled comfort. I love that. What the death doula does is enact skilled comfort, to give care, to give support, to enable the greater good. It is this giving of care, giving of the deep self that summons and supports and solidifies the space for others. So this means in this space other people can be heard, they can be listened to, they can be understood, they can be cared for. So doulas offer this skilled, consensual, informed support, and they construct and they hold a space. So the central trope of the death doula is hold the space. And I realised, responding to Jackie and Jamie, that if we're trying to think about the space between leadership and followership, maybe there's something really important to explore in holding the space. That probably is the role for the person or the role within the leadership and followership binary opposition. And it is particularly, I would argue, the role of Generation X. Our job is to hold the space for the generations, for the citizens, for the scholars who follow us. Of course, so much of our culture is focused on being a leader, and even the followership literature is about being a leader in training. But what if we're not drawn to either binary opposition, leader or follower? We are comfortable creating and sitting in the space to enable the support of others. We're not wanting power, we're not wanting titles, we're not wanting self-important nonsense, and we're not wanting money. We sit in a space that values research and values teaching in and of itself. We value learning. We value knowledge. We don't have to move that knowledge at speed to industry partnerships. We research because the research has value, not that it can be monetized. We teach, we learn, not for graduate attributes or rubrics, but to recognize the gift of learning. Such statements you hear so rarely these days because there is no space for them. There is no space for these words. And in many ways, if you think about it, teaching and learning and research is a lot like death. Because death happens to every single one of us. But think about how rarely we speak the words of death. Similarly, learning and teaching is the fodder of life. Yet how often do you hear somebody celebrate, I've learnt something today. Learning matters, teaching matters. And you see, this matters so much for academics because academic life holds profound responsibilities. Responsibilities particularly to people in need. People who have sacrificed their entire lives, their family's time to participate in education. We hold their hopes. We hold their dreams. We hold their aspirations. So those of us who have the great privilege of working in education have allowed these astonishing, remarkable micro moments of learning and teaching that you can see has transformed the life of a student. We've allowed those incredible moments, so rare but so precious, of research where you are sitting in the knowledge and you know that you've moved knowledge just a little bit further down the road. We have allowed these moments to be erased and marginalised and demeaned because they can't be monetised. They can't be slotted into the conventional narratives of work or life because learning doesn't sit comfortably in the daily lives of our citizens because learning questions, it challenges, it transforms, it agitates. These learning acts do not sit comfortably in KPIs or vision statements or mission statements. But our job, like the death doula, is to hold this space, not for leadership, not for followership, but to provide time for the next generation of scholars, to allow them to make decisions, sit in their courage, learn about themselves, and then develop alternative trajectories. Our job is to hold the space as long as we can so that the next generation can learn enough so that they can make the changes that we were unable to make. So maybe there is room for a learning doula or a thought doula. And they exist in the space between leadership and followership. Mia Raines has written so powerfully about the importance of standing in and with an idea, to be assertive and courageous in standing in the space of that idea, being compassionate, being patient, but also taking responsibility for the decisions that we make. We start to learn how to assemble boundaries between ourselves and other people, and therefore we start to understand the spaces around ourselves and others, and we can hold that space with meaning and with purpose. When we hold the space, we provide the space for others to live, to claim their sense of self, to claim the capacity to make meaning, to claim their courage. There is a sacredness, a preciousness to learning that we all deny every single day. Our task is with gentleness and kindness to create a safe space for learning and thinking and reading and writing and research. We are the caregivers for learners. We hold the space for the development of others. And this remains a privilege. It was Polonius who said, "Neither a leader nor a follower be." There is a third space between leaders and followers, and maybe Generation X, who has suffered so much from the vagaries and the assumptions of power. Our role is to construct and to occupy that space, to be the learning doula for the next generation. Hold the space. Space for learning. Space for thinking. Space for reading. Space for making difficult choices. That is, to cite Jackie and Jamie, spacership. Hold the space. Hold the space. And know that this job in and of itself is so valuable. I wish you love, light, and peace. Tea out.